Hello and welcome to the third AnimDojo Podcast. My name's Tom, co-founder of Blue Zoo, and for this episode we're doing something a bit different from the previous two podcasts we've done, which have been on discussions about the animation industry and showreels. And this one is something called Motion Paths, where we chat to one person and talk about their career path to where they were today and how they've kind of done a few different things, maybe done not so standard path to where they are. And for today's motion path, we're literally walking along a path, and that is in Central Park in Manhattan, talking to Ben Steer, who's an animation director, but he's had a bit of a varied journey there, starting off at Bournemouth University and then veering into a few different jobs, including touring the world with the band and ending up at Blue Zoo as an animation director. So, going back to when you were little, Ben, what made you want to go into animation?
I don't think I was one of these people who kind of knew early on. I've got friends who were kind of like, had dreams of joining Pixar when they were only 7 or 8 years old. I loved visuals and I loved graphics and I loved drawing. I've always regretted not maintaining my drawing throughout my life, but I would always listen to music and I would always create visuals in my head to it. For me, listening to music is a very a visual thing. It's a visual experience for me. And I think that it was only when I started talking to people slightly later on in life that I realised that wasn't commonplace for children. So I think that was the first signs that there was something slightly different about me from the other kids at school, in so much as I was always trying to visualize things. I was always thinking about things visually. I was always thinking about visual representations of things. But it wasn't really animation at all that I had any interest in at that point. I obviously loved the usual cartoons, but
So you're very creative.
I was creative. I was naturally good at art. I think that's probably most of the people you talk to when you enter animation circles. Nearly everyone was good at art when they were back at school, and I came from a slightly creative background. My dad's an architect, so we had a lot of interesting images on the walls and strange paintings that my parents had bought back in the 80s, obviously when I was a child. And I think that was quite seminal for me. It was quite very early on. I was kind of like being exposed to quite abstract imagery, and the idea of abstract art to me was normalised from quite an early age. So I think that was quite pivotal.
Cool. So you went through school and everything.
Yeah, like a normal person.
Yeah. And then you ended up studying animation at university. So how did you arrive at that?
I was completely lost. I thought I was going to go and do an art foundation and sort of try and find myself during that year. But actually what happened was that I stumbled across a prospectus for Bournemouth University, and there was this one page. This was back in the late 90s, and there was, the prospectus there was nothing of any interest to me in it, but on this one page it had spaceships, dragons, like some kind of horrific skeleton guy or something, I can't remember, but it was amazing. I was absolutely enthralled by this idea of this is what I might actually go and do as a career. It was literally at that moment, just happening upon that page, that basically set my entire animation career path.
When you stumbled across a prospectus.
The prospectus.
Not literally. It was on the floor, was it?
No, to be fair, what actually happened was my mum threw it at me because I think she was frustrated. It was that one page. It was the one sequence of images on that one page, basically.
Cool. So you applied and then got in.
Yeah, I applied. I scraped in. They said, you need to get this score in your A levels, and I just about got that score in my A levels. I went to quite an old traditional Church of England school, and there weren't any modern. It was very old school. So all we had were choices, things like economics and the sciences and English literature and things like that. So I ended up doing things that were complete. I did art. That was the only thing I did that was in any way related to animation, and everything else I did was purely just to get the points to get into university.
Right. So you did the course. Did you have any idea of when you saw the course, thinking in terms of a career, or was it like, I'll just go to university, then figure out what I'm going to do then?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can't really remember back then. The big discovery for me at university was that after 3 years of learning and getting to, and obviously kind of becoming part of this community, I never felt confident in my own abilities. And I think that was something that kind of that was part of the reason why I stayed on from after the 3 years at Bournemouth. I stayed on and did a master's degree. And I need to probably point out that when you and I went to university, it was the final year when university fees didn't exist. We basically went to university for free. So it wasn't a huge decision. I mean, we were, extremely lucky.
Had nothing to lose.
No, exactly. So you could go to university, you could drop out after a year, and you would have been no more out of pocket. So given that it was such a, it wasn't an expensive endeavour, I basically stayed on for a fourth year, just in order to kind of increase my knowledge and understanding of animation, because it was something that I felt I didn't have enough confidence in to kind of go out into the larger world and start job hunting. And the more people I speak to, a lot of animators now, especially people who are studying, and it seems to be a similar feeling. There's often a feeling of a lack of confidence in your ability.
Well, it's a massive step to go from the cocoon of education into the rest of your life.
Yes, definitely. And some people don't struggle with it so much, and some people do. And quite often it's actually has little to no reflection on someone's abilities. Their confidence.
Confidence thing,
yeah, exactly. It's just self-confidence and self-belief, and your abilities and your self-belief are quite often very unrelated.
For people thinking about whether they want to do an MA or not, how did you find it compared to the BA?
It was essentially very similar. We covered a lot of similar ground. What it basically did for me was it enabled me to kind of just continue learning and continue experimenting in a sort of a safe environment where I wasn't having to worry about trying to find a job. Like I said, it wasn't expensive at the time either.
So it wasn't for for going overseas or something like that?
No,
like a lot of people do MAs for?
No, I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. I just wanted to...
Buying more time.
I just wanted to further my education, essentially. And like I said, it was a cheap option. I mean, the thing is, I would say to people who had done the BA, I wouldn't suggest you would do an MA on the same course at the same school, because it's primarily designed for people coming from other courses. So you're essentially cramming in 3 years of education just into kind of like 12 months.
But on the flip side, it's very good if you've done a different BA and then you want to get into animation, you can do the MA to move sideways.
Yes.
Cool. So when you did the MA and you finished that after a year, what happened?
Well, my course, my journey was throughout my 20s was generally I kind of moved away from animation. I still hadn't found this kind of confidence in my abilities. I still didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing, or I knew what I wanted.
But that's very common, right? But not everyone knows that's common.
No, of course. And I also don't think that... I know that there are a lot of people who don't go into the animation industry, but I wanted to. I just didn't really know how. I wasn't really prepared. I don't think I was ready in myself. I didn't have any self-confidence in my abilities. So I basically went off and just did other work. I went back to my hometown. I ended up just working for the local council. I worked for some pensions company. I got into a band. I started playing music. I eventually started doing freelance work here and there, and that was actually how I got back in touch with Blue Zoo as a freelance generalist. And throughout this entire time, I was just doing other things. I'd gone into a relationship. I was, playing in various gigs here and there. And I think I really, really needed that time to kind of go off and just find what it was I wanted to do. As long as I was earning money, it didn't really matter. There wasn't like a ticking clock that, dictated that I had to find my career path by a certain age. So what eventually happened was I joined a band that was quite serious and was full-time when I was about 29. And I stayed with them for a couple of years. And after that all fell apart, as it was inevitably going to do. It wasn't then until I finally joined Blue Zoo full-time. We'd been in discussions, and they thought it'd be a really good idea if I joined the productions team, because I'd built up a good relationship with you guys, if you remember. And and then the rest's history. From then on, I've just kind of got my head down, worked the shop floor, and I've been enjoying it, having a great time, and now I'm fully 100% committed to this career. Having tried others and having gone other places, it's just made it more. It's galvanised it in my mind that this is what I need to be doing, and this is what I enjoy doing the most.
So that's one thing I wanted to ask on. Did you think that going with the band you toured the world?
Yeah, we did
parts of it.
We toured. Yeah, we had some pretty crazy moments where we were playing gigs all over the place. Yeah, and what it really helped was to give me a view of another industry, a completely different industry, and actually one that's notoriously difficult to break, one that's notoriously difficult to make money in, and one that's very ruthless as well. So having seen that as an option, coming to the animation industry, you realise how great it is, how amazing the people are, how friendly everyone is, and it just made it clearer in my mind that that's where I needed to be.
Gave you a kind of bigger frame of reference of what you wanted to do in terms of different careers.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard this story throughout the animation industry. You know, there was a guy at Pixar. I remember them talking about it as well. I think it was the guy who directed Monsters University. We went to a talk with him, and he said that they had, you know, there was a guy there who'd been a plumber for 20 years and then decided to try his hand at animation, and would just, you know, really took to it like a fish to water, and that's what he ended up doing. You know, there's nothing to say that you have to be on your career path after you graduate. You know, there is plenty of room for people to kind of find their way, and there's plenty of time. There's no age bias. It's not like you're not going to get a job if you're over 30, you know, so you have time. I think that's the kind of the overriding feeling I have.
Because I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts where it seems these days there's a big pressure for graduates to pick their career path and then stick with it, which is a massive kind of pressure to succeed very quickly.
Yeah, but I can imagine. Yeah,
you know, there is no thing as a job for life anymore.
No.
And people do kind of switch back and forth, where some people have multiple careers in their lifetime, which is much more common than it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of 30 years ago.
I think the last figure I heard was on average they think people have 7 different jobs in their lifetime or something. You know, that are considered careers or something. That could be complete nonsense. But definitely, someone definitely said that. And
You've said it now. So.
I've said it, so you can quote me.
Cool. Okay. So within Blue Zoo, you started animating on a show, and then you kind of then moved up the chain.
Yes. So I think this is really important, because I was talking to we've been meeting a few companies out here in New York, and someone else said it recently as well, that there's a general feeling that a lot of graduates are coming out of school now with the idea that they want to be like an art director or some kind of supervisor, or they want to be a director even. And it's not really until you get into the industry you realise, first of all, no one's looking for those people for those roles from graduates. We want people to we want to find the talented people to then allow them to then work up to those roles.
So it's just started to waz it down with rain. So we just found a little bridge. So it's going to go echoey now. If you imagine Home Alone, the bridge that Macaulay Culkin runs under in Central Park, then imagine where we are now.
I think that's him over there. He's still there. Anyway, let's just ignore him. Anyway, the question was
about, you started at Blue Zoo as an animator and then worked your way up to animation director.
Yeah. So I basically started, like I said, I was working in the productions team, and we were animating up to about 8 seconds a day, about 7 to 8 seconds a day of footage for children's TV series. It being children's TV series, you have to make sure that your sort of acting choices are very clear. Generally, kind of people's motivations are always very sort of black and white in children's TV, so it's a very good way of kind of honing the skills of kind of clear, big, bold acting. And if you're doing that day in, day out, you learn pretty quickly how to animate, you know, and you're surrounded by a good team as well. So because also you're having to output a lot of footage a day, you have to, first of all, you have a lot of responsibility, because there isn't the time and the resources to have lots of dailies and lots of feedback. So you have to be entrusted by your supervisors to basically get on with the job. You can be left for a week at a time to just be basically given scenes and shots to work out yourself, and you're left to do it. And it's actually a very, very good lesson, because you're not constantly relying on someone else to sort your camera out, or a supervisor to kind of tweak the fingers and the tiny details. You have to just do it all yourself. So you learn, I'd say you learn the hard way, which is...
You learn quickly,
You learn quickly and you learn the hard way, yes, exactly. And obviously everyone takes to it at different speeds, but, it's a valuable lesson. So that's essentially what I was doing for years. And I just learnt to get faster and faster and more confident, and that's finally, after years of animating, I finally found that confidence, and it's just a natural process that you have to go through. I think having a lack of confidence to a degree is actually healthy, because what it does is it ensures that you're pushing yourself, that you're trying to improve. It just becomes dangerous when that kind of lack of when that self-doubt becomes too great that it actually cripples you and it actually stops you progressing. So you have to find a healthy balance, and it's very difficult to do.
But it does come down to balance, because equally, if you've got too much confidence,
Yeah.
that you can struggle to get a job.
Yes, exactly. First of all, it makes you an annoying person if you have too much confidence. But secondly, what it means is if you're very confident in your own work, you're probably not seeing what's wrong with your work, so you're therefore not going to see how you can improve. So you have to strike this healthy balance between having enough confidence to move forward and to make progress, but not having too little to hinder you because you're too worried about making mistakes. And it affects everyone. It affects all of us who I animate with. We all have that kind of self-doubt balance that we're kind of constantly nurturing and trying to get right. The one thing I tell all students is fail forward. I don't know who coined that phrase, but it's the easiest, simplest way to remember it. Fail forward. You have to fail in order to make progress. And every time you fail, you become slightly better at not failing.
And that's really what the grounding of what AnimDojo is the fact that a lot of people always want to make that showreel piece. But you don't, like an artist, you don't become a great artist by doing lots of oil paintings. You become a good artist by, Michelangelo had in his sketchbook full of very simple, quick doodles.
Yeah.
And that's what makes you brilliant, by doing lots of little small steps, which you did, animating for a couple of seconds a day.
Yeah.
On a production.
Yeah, and I look back at my early work. It's awful. It's terrible. I wouldn't, and it's when I see people's show reels as well, because we have to hire people all the time. I'll ask them like, "Oh, have you got anything more to show me?" And the fact is they do, but it's too far in the past for them to show. So they've already improved so much in the last year and a half that they no longer wish to show me that older animation. So they might only have about 3 shots to show, and it's because you improve so quickly. Generally, and you're able to look back and what's brilliant about animation is because all our animation is stored somewhere. You've always got it on YouTube or you've got it on a hard drive. It's very easy to look back and see how you've improved. So that's the same for many arts, but it's really visible in animation. So just going back, like my early, I animated on Tree Fu Tom. I cringe when I watch it now, but it's lovely to see because I can see how far I've come at the same time.
I once read a quote where they said if you look at your work a year ago and you don't cringe, you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Yeah,
you're staying too still.
Yeah, no, that's true, because I can even think back to stuff I've done a year ago and think actually, I can already see what's wrong with it.
Yeah. So how did becoming an animation director happen then?
It kind of happened, eventually, it's my current job title, and it's happened, I'd say, quite slowly. I was always determined to just learn my trade. I always say to people, before it's the old adage of learn to walk before you can run. But especially in the animation industry, you can't go in and presume to be an animation director or a director and tell other animators what to do until you yourself have experienced it and done it and done your time. It sounds punitive, but it's true. I mean, animating every day, 8 seconds a day, is really quite tough. It can be very difficult, but at the end of the day, after a few years of doing that, you really know what you're talking about, and then you can free yourself up and you can start being more creative with it, and at that point, when you're starting to deal with more of the ideas generation, sort of the generating of ideas, that's when you can start, working in a more superior roles.
And I think it's, I guess one of the things I think that makes a good animation director is not so much the skill, but it's the communication.
Yes.
And that's something that takes a long time with experience to learn how to communicate well. That I guess when you're younger, you don't have that experience of communicating in a studio environment with a wide array of personalities.
Yeah, exactly. And also it's just a life skill, just people management. You can go on as many management courses as you like, but at the end of the day, just having experience of working with people and how to communicate with people is something that you, like any other skill in life, you learn. So I'm far better at communicating with people now than I used to be, say, 7 years ago, just because I've had to do it. Like anything, you do something, you become better at it.
And you learn what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So didn't you became an animation director and then you stepped back for a bit?
Yes, so at one point I was promoted to animation director, and I basically realised that I still didn't feel confident enough in my animation skills. I was telling a lot of people what to do and how to frame their shots and what beats to try and hit, But ultimately, deep down, I really knew what I ultimately needed to do was just go back to the shop floor again. I just needed to go back, spend a few more years just honing my craft, and then go back to being an animation director again.
So you went back to being an animator for a bit. How long was that?
Oh God, I can't.
Was it a year or so?
Yeah, no, it was more than that. I went on to Tree Futon season 2, so that would have been about a year and a half. I did Poodle, that was about a year, and then we did Digby Dragon. So I did another 3 projects just as a lead animator.
Then what's the difference between a lead animator then an animation director?
So a lead animator, generally you will be in the team of animators, and you'll be animating generally with about the same number of frames to produce daily, sometimes a bit less. And you'll just be in charge of kind of representing the team and liaising with your team members to make sure everything's okay, and working out, assigning whose shots go to who and things like that. Whereas an animation director generally won't actually be animating at all. They'll be far more concerned with like analysing what the animation style will be for the piece, and then
story
and story, exactly, and working with the director to kind of get the best out of the story. And also just feeding back to the animators and making sure that they are, the way that they're moving the characters around is all on model, making sure that the character is coming across. I know a lot of the larger productions, like in film, have animation supervisors as well, where you have basically sort of several more layers to the kind of
so it's more directing than animating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So nowadays you're doing a lot with development as well, kind of helping kind of clients develop their ideas and scripts. How have you found transitioning from an animator role to doing that script, helping with script stuff? Is that something that you found has come natural, or have you had to do any kind of extra training or learning for that?
Well, basically how it all came about was I would sometimes get quite frustrated as an animator, because I felt like sometimes, the script I might be dealing with, or the sometimes just the story beat that I was dealing with, I felt like it could be improved, but I knew that as an animator I didn't have the power to make those decisions. I was essentially, you're given the scene, and you're given the shot, and you're given the dialogue, and you have to do the best you can with it. So I took more interest in the sort of the writing process and looking at story. And I think it was around that time I really started reading up on it. I read several books about writing and screenplay writing and story structure and things like that, just purely out of interest. I found the subject very fascinating, and at no point did anyone ask me, "Oh, by the way, Ben, do you want to come and write a script?" Because that's just not how it works. What actually happened is that I would just start volunteering to help other people on projects and say, is there anything I can do? Do you want me to kind of have a look at, if you've got some problems with it, can we iron it out together? This kind of thing. So I showed enthusiasm, and I put in the time. I'd stay late after work if it meant that I could kind of get involved in a project that I liked the look of. So I think that that sort of display of enthusiasm really helped to kind of get me considered later on when people needed help with scripts and things like that. And then eventually I think Blue Zoo kind of then trusted me enough, after I'd kind of proved that I could do it. They trusted me enough to actually give me script writing jobs here and there. And then one of the most recent jobs I've done was for Playmobil, where they sent us a script, and it wasn't really working. It had been translated from German, and I sort of, I tried to go above and beyond. I said, well, listen, let me have a go. I'll try and rewrite the script, and I'll see if I can improve it. And they agreed it was improved after I finished with it. So ultimately, it was just another great learning experience. It was another chance for me to just try script writing again. And again, it came from me volunteering to do things and trying them and sort of seeing if I could, and sort of saying, look, there's nothing to lose. If I try and improve this script and it's worse, then just go back to where it was. But it's all stuff that I had, it came from me. It was my enthusiasm, and it was my time that I put into it in order to get there, basically.
I think that's probably one of the most important pieces of advice from my perception, is that just taking that opportunity to ask if you can do something, because in life nothing nothing will land in your lap.
No,
You've got to go out there and ask for it.
Exactly, and I was just saying this to someone the other day who was telling me, they were completely unrelated to our industry, but someone was telling me the other day how frustrated they were with their job. And the first bit of advice I'd give someone in that situation is, no one's going to come and promote you. No one's looking around for someone to kind of hoik out of their boring job and give them a great job. If you want a change in your life, in your career, you have to chase it. And it sounds obvious when I put it like that, but actually, you see people complaining about their job, but they're not actively doing anything to change that, whereas they can, and I have, and I've seen other people do it as well.
And I guess that is a confidence thing, because the worst that can happen is they say, no thanks, I'm all right.
Yeah, so, exactly. And again, it's about becoming slowly more comfortable with failing and realizing that you're not actually losing anything. If you, like, for example, even for you, Tom, I've done a couple of pitches recently where I've written up some ideas and said, look, this is how I would do it. We've given it to the client. The client said, no thanks. So I go, oh God, okay, I don't mind anymore, because a lot of the confidence has come from the fact that I've done enough things. I've finished enough projects in my life that have been accepted as being quite good now, that I know I'm capable of good output now. I've proved it to myself, and I've proved it to other people in the company. So now I feel I'm far more at liberty to fail now and again. I can occasionally, I can mess things up. Not that I do, because there's too much of a good structure around me. There's too much of a framework around me that we don't generally fail at anything. I mean, that's quite a strong term anyway. But it means now that I don't have that fear anymore. I know that I can trust that my opinion on what will work is probably going to be right.
And it's also about taking learnings from those times when it doesn't go according to plan, saying, well, how can I learn from this so I don't make the same mistake twice?
Yeah, exactly. And then what you start to do is, when you get more confidence and you start getting feedback, instead of what generally happens when you're younger and you're less experienced and someone's giving you feedback, is it's quite common and quite natural for us to seize up. We tense up. We cringe a little inside when someone's telling you what's wrong with what you've done, and you get defensive, and you want to almost retaliate and sort of say, well, my opinion's different. Whereas actually, the more confident you get, the more accepting of feedback you get, and actually it gets to the point where you become more welcoming of feedback, to the point where now, if someone's got some feedback for me, generally I really want to hear it. I find it fascinating now, because I want to hear someone else's take on what I'm doing, because I know that my opinion is worth it, and I know that theirs is too. So then what used to feel like, to me, like really difficult criticism to take, now feels like an interesting creative discussion, and it's all to do with my.
It's all subjective to an extent.
It's my perspective. All that's changed is my perspective. It's not obviously there are lots of other interesting things that can be happening in these conversations. For example, it's not always that simple. You can have someone who's just very bad at giving feedback and can make people feel bad about their work. But unfortunately, I don't have to deal with those people.
But that's someone who's bad at their job.
Yeah, exactly. and unfortunately, a lot of us will encounter people who are bad at their jobs and bad at communication and bad at giving feedback.
Cool. So from that, what would you do the same path again if you were 18 years old again?
I love the idea of going back to being 18 and knowing what I know now, and just being some kind of super mega ace at my job who was just miraculously.
But then you might have too much confidence, and it might go really badly wrong.
Yeah, it's true. Well, then I'd go on a new journey. Do you know what? The way I think about a question like that is, we have to be really strict on the rules. So I'm 18 and I know this career.
So no gambling. So.
I did have a chip on my shoulder, so to speak, for quite a long time when I first started off full time in animation, because I was in my early 30s, and I was sitting alongside and working alongside people in their early 20s who were at the same level, some higher level than me, and it felt very much like I had even more to prove. But it was very far from the truth. Again, it was just purely my perspective on the situation. No one cares. Everyone's got their own challenge. Everyone's running their own race. And I think the only thing, going back to the original question, I think the only thing I would change would probably be, I don't know, because I think actually the experiences I had right up until before I started full-time at Blue Zoo were some of my most amazing experiences. Yeah. Like I was touring in a band. We were literally going around the world playing gigs and things, and I think it
adds up.
It adds up, and it's contributed to me having some great memories. So no, I don't think I would change anything.
Okay. So for anyone out there starting out at that 18, early 20s stage of their career, Have you got any nuggets of advice into if they're not sure of what path they want to go down?
Probably advice they've already heard, but it's always worth reiterating, is to not be afraid to fail. And it's really, really important. It's the biggest life lesson. You just have to keep trying at something, and you can keep failing at it, and that's good. And the thing is, I honestly don't think, as I was growing up, as I was drawing, as I was dabbling in animation, I don't think anyone ever told us that. I don't think anyone really...
Yeah, it seems quite more of a modern mentality.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, like, one example that I use for myself is the fact that I'm going to life drawing, and I have to remind myself every week that I'm not going to life drawing to create beautiful art. I'm going to life drawing to become better at life drawing. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't matter if at the end of it I don't come away with something that looks beautiful, as long as I have just slowly, just done another lesson in improving my observation skills and improving my pencil skills. And it's not about creating beautiful things, it's just about having experience and building on that experience. And the other lesson that I'd say I think is really important is that you really, really can do anything you want. And I whenever I heard people like Will Smith and all these amazingly optimistic Hollywood film stars say this kind of stuff, it just sounds like complete nonsense. But the older you get, the more you realise it's true. The people who are successful at what they do are the people who just did it the most. And if I had spent the last 15 years of my life playing guitar every day, I would be an amazing guitar player. I'd earn money doing it, and I might be in some amazing band. But the same goes for animation, the same goes for illustration. The people who are the best at it are simply the people who did it the most.
But it's focus practice.
Yes, exactly. And it's the people who did the most, yeah, you're quite right, and the people who obviously had a goal. And the thing is that basically accounts for any skill in life. And I always thought when I was growing up, and I even think it was told to me this way, that you can either draw or you can't. There were people in my class who just couldn't draw, and then there was me who could, and there didn't seem to be any logic as to why I could draw and they couldn't. And ultimately, when it comes down to it now, the people I see who are brilliant at art, it's nothing to do with how good they were at school. It's just to do with how much they practice, what lessons they're doing, how hard are they pushing themselves. So ultimately, you have the control. You have the control over how good you are at anything.
So you recently made your second short film at Blue Zoo, which is Mamoon, which has been BAFTA nominated. And so it's obviously you're doing something right when it comes to short filmmaking. And there's a lot of people out there who may be making their very first short animated film, or thinking about it, or making another one. What do you think? How do you approach a short film that you think that makes a good short film? How do you start from that kind of blank slate?
Well, that's just it. I don't start from a blank slate, and I think if you're looking at a blank white page and wondering what kind of short film you can make, your approach is wrong. I would never start a project with absolutely nothing. The only time I'd get enthused about, first of all, I'm only ever going to make a film about something that I feel is going to be a really strong idea, and something I feel deep down is going to work. If I have my doubts, if I'm not sure the idea is ready, then I won't run with it. I'll wait until the idea is ready. And I don't think you can do that if you're just staring at a blank white page. So as with any project that I've had to kind of conjure something up, I've always tried my best to ensure that there's always a seed of an idea there already. So with Mamoon, it was we had a brief set by the company, by you, because you exist here in this interview, and so it was easy for me then to take that, and so I didn't start with a blank page there. And then secondly, I knew that what the vague subject matter I wanted to base it on, which was the Syrian migrant crisis. So I already had the seeds of an idea there. And there was another situation recently where I had to write a very short script for a potential advert that basically revolved around a dog. And that's all I had. There were no other parameters. And I knew the only way I could come up with a story was if I gave myself some parameters and I gave myself some point of inspiration. So I started looking into what the dog represents in Chinese culture and all this kind of thing. So in other words, what I did was, instead of just placing a blank white piece of paper in front of me, I made sure that there was something else in front of me that I could work from. So there was already the seeds of something that I could possibly develop into an idea. So I think if I were to give any advice to someone making a short film, I'd say exactly that. You need the seeds of something first.
Something you care about.
Something you care about, exactly. And I think those moments, those points of inspiration, can only really come if you're going out of your way to experience and see and read and watch interesting things. So I've always got a book on the go. I always try and go to galleries. Me and my girlfriend go to the theatre, and every time I'm out and about and I'm sort of absorbing these things, I'm always partially aware that there could be great ideas there buried that I just need to kind of make note of. If something kind of strikes me as something of interest, I'll probably jot it down on my phone. So there's always and I've heard this technique being used by a lot of people, especially writers. If they hear dialogue, if they hear some interesting conversation, you just need to get into the habit of just collecting good ideas. I've even got a folder on my computer where anytime I see an interesting image or someone links me to something that looks interesting, I'll pop it in this folder just on Dropbox. So it's on any computer I own. I have the same Dropbox folder. And it just means I've got this, I think it's up to several thousand images now where I can quickly flick through, and I've instantly got a bank of amazing, inspiring things that I can use as a sort of a jumping off point for an idea.
Cool.
That's a
good
very long-winded
good
answer.
bit of advice. Cool. I think that's it. So cheers, Ben.
Well, thank you.
I hope you guys listening have enjoyed hearing Ben's path to where he is.
My ramblings.
And that's it. So cheers for listening to this podcast. If you check out other AnimDojo stuff, we've recently released 3 videos and a rig for learning Maya character animation if you haven't done it before. So it's a nice free way of dipping your toe in to the world of Maya animation if you haven't done that. See if you like it. Then if you do, you can get involved with more AnimDojo stuff to become a brilliant character animator. And coming up, we've got more podcasts which are on career advice. Oh, just nearly got hit in the head by a flying duck. And there's more podcasts to come, and also check out the other podcasts on showreel advice and lots more. And that's it. So cheers for listening, and thanks, and bye.
Bye.